Welcome to this presentation of the country of Austria, the country of philosophers, musicians, and dictators. Despite this being the case, the country has maintained a pretty laid-back tone. And, of course, it's had its fair share of influential people, world-renowned. The country has maintained a neutral stance on world affairs officially. This presentation will overview some of the basic country traits, such as the location, cuisine, language and dialects, religion, and a few notable details about the country, such as outdoor recreational activities and influential people that hail from it. According to an article by George Hill in the Britannica Encyclopedia, article titled Austria, the page describes the country as being, quote, landlocked, end quote. The country is generally located in Eastern Europe, surrounded by the Czech Republic, Germany, Switzerland, Italy, Slovenia, Croatia, Hungary, and Slovakia. Despite the country being Eastern, as some would call it, the country is still central to much of the traffic across Europe. Food, or cuisine and foodways. According to Rick Steves' book, Eastern Europe 10th edition, Austrian dishes utilize meats and fish. Despite not being next to an ocean, they get their fish shipped to them. One such country staple is the Wiener Schnitzel, nonetheless, a veal cutlet that can be breaded, fried, and served on a platter, also served in Germany. Within the capital of Vienna exists a number of classical cafes to add to that, especially within the city center core, as the design of their capital city of Vienna has multiple rings around it where old city walls used to be. In fact, Rick Steves makes the comparison, quote, in Vienna, the living room is down the street at the neighborhood coffee house, end quote. These coffee houses exemplify the extremely slow and laid-back pace of the country at large. Enjoying the afternoon with some coffee, cake, and a newspaper allows one to sit back and relax. Bit of a representation of the country as a whole. Though this is not necessarily the case in the life of every Austrian, it certainly is the expected norm. Language and dialect. According to the Austria article by George Hill mentioned earlier, in the Britannica Encyclopedia in the Languages section, most of the country speaks German, specifically one of three subdialects, a Middle Bavarian, Southern Bavarian, or Swiss dialect. The Middle Bavarian is common up north and in the capital of Vienna. The Southern is more common in the south, and the Almanac, or Swiss dialect, is more common in the west. These dialects are in part influenced by their geographical location, such as how the Swiss dialect, or the Almanac dialect, is prominent in the Austrian Alps located on the western side of the country, the little tail, if you would. The Swiss speakers are Almanac in terms of descendants, and thus have, quote, cultural and dialectual affinities with the German Swiss to the west and the Swabians in Germany to the north, end quote. This sets them aside from the remainder of the country. Religion. In the same article mentioned earlier, quote, about 3/4 of Austrians are Christians, end quote. It also mentions that the remainder is primarily composed of other various Christian groups. In an article by the Austrian Embassy in Washington, it further describes some of the nuances and unique aspects of religion in the country on their page titled Austria's Religious Landscape, such as religious freedoms and protections. One protection in particular, though, is how crimes committed against religious institutions are tried as criminal. This, along with other similar protections, demonstrates the level of respect the state has for its religious affairs. Conversely, though, there is a separation of church and state. This, however, does not mean, though, that the church does not have its influence, particularly the deep-rooted influence of Christianity. One example of Christian history that can be found in the country is mentioned in the book mentioned earlier by Rick Steves, Eastern Europe 10th edition, where it highlights one place in particular. One example of the Christian history in the country can be found in the earlier mentioned book by Rick Steves, Eastern Europe 10th edition, where it highlights the St. Stephen's Cathedral, or Stephansdom, as one of the greatest attractions that the capital city of Vienna has to offer. This cathedral poses an impressive height, especially from the South Tower, and is located in the center of the capital. Looking at the cathedral, one can see the various artistic, religious, and architectural influence that all goes into producing forth such a building, and at such an early point in time. In the previously mentioned article by George Hill, in the demographics section, it mentions that the change in demographics can be seen as increasing in refugees and immigrants from worldwide crises, such as the Cold War. The general public plan for many of these incoming people was to provide sanctuary before releasing them to overseas countries for a permanent solution, though many of these refugees ended up remaining in the larger cities scattered across the country. To explain a few unique religious policies, we can look at the schedule for religion by age. Until the age of 12, the child has no say in what their religion will be, because it is all parenting at that point. Although between the ages of 12 and 14, they must be consulted with their parents. Finally, from the age of 14 onward, the child chooses their own religion. In addition to this schedule, though, another unique aspect of the country of Austria in this matter is that there is a mandatory membership fee of 1% income to one's church, a tithe, if you will, that the country makes everyone pay. You'll also have to consider, though, that there is a list of legally recognized churches in the country of Austria. Despite these rules, though, nobody is forced to be religious or attend any church. Outdoor recreation. In the earlier mentioned article by George Hill, titled Austria in paragraph 4, he mentions the Austrian Alps, a mountain range on the western side of the country, earlier mentioned where the Aeronautical or Swiss dialect exists. This can be divided into the northern and southern ranges with soft and, as he describes it, quote, crystalline rocks in between. The highest part of the range is called the Großglockner, an elevation of 12,460 feet, or 3,798 meters. In the second paragraph, in the services section, it is pointed out that, of all things, skiing is one of the renowned facilities of the country, among other activities such as outdoor sports. The country of Austria is also then known for having vast woods, very scenic lakes, as well as an abundance of meadows spread across the countryside. All of these many different scenic areas, places to visit, and just the atmosphere in general makes the country of Austria one of the most beautiful tourist areas in all of Europe. Picture perfect, as some might say. Influential people. There have been a number of influential people that have come out of the country of Austria. It would be difficult to account for all of them, but just to name a few. Rick Steves, in his book Eastern Europe 10th edition, Vienna, capital of Austria, quote, was on the forefront of the arts and sciences, end quote. He also then gives us a list then of just a few of the famous or influential people that have come out of the country of Austria. This list includes musical composers such as Beethoven, Mozart, Brahms, and Strauss. Beethoven and his symphonies, Brahms and his Brahms Lullaby. It's just a few of the musical influential people that have existed that have come out of Austria. There's also Doppler and Boltzmann, two scientists, such as from the known Doppler effect. And then there's also philosophers, such as Sigmund Freud, Husserl, Schlick, Gödel, and Steiner. That's my name. There have also been architects, such as Wagner and Luce, and painters such as Klimt, Schiele, and Kokosch. These influential people are just an indication of the level of cultural and technical sophistication culturally associated with the country as a whole. Steves later goes on to say that, quote, classical music is everywhere, end quote, as there exist many musical museums, especially within the capital for tourists and onlookers to visit, for people such as Mozart or Beethoven. If the country was to specialize in a particular field, it would be classical music. In another article by Wilfred F. Knapp, Adolf Hitler is the name of the article. In the first paragraph, it mentions that Adolf Hitler was born in Austria as well. For better or worse, this country nevertheless has produced people of great influence. Just to overview, the country of Austria is located at a central point in Europe and thus is a central hub for many nearby countries. The hearty Wiener schnitzels and slow coffee houses represent different aspects of the cultural speed and comfort. The country is separated by region into 3 different dialects of German, with those in the west having an affinity for their Swiss and southern German neighbors, and the religion is generally the same as that found in the U.S., with only a few minor differences. That being said, many of the country inhabitants are some form of Christian. With plentiful lakes, snowy mountains, and woodland areas that cover the countryside, Austria has a wealth of natural viewing spectacles to show. This, in addition to the number of influential people that the country has produced, makes for quite the tourist attraction for seeing locations of famous people, where they lived, or just go on a scenic trip. The country of Austria, then, we can say is culturally rich, and to put it simply as Rick Steves would say, quote, after the turmoil of 2 world wars and the loss of Austria's empire, Vienna has settled down into a somewhat sleepy, pleasant place where culture is still king, end quote. The same can probably be said for the remainder of the country. With a wealth of history and easy attitude developed, tourism has taken over the country quite considerably. The book I keep referencing, by Rick Steves, called Eastern Europe 10th Edition, is in fact a tourism guide, as an indicator to the level of tourism that the country has gained, with the capital of Austria being the primary focus of that particular book. Being a tourist location helps the local economy greatly, and so much so that at this point, the country might just be able to lay down and take it easy, and just be an exhibit. Thank you for watching this presentation, and please let me know if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or complaints. References are listed at the end, and have a good day.